Last month, the federal carbon tax increased by 3 cents per liter of gas and diesel, and the official opposition has been claiming loudly and regularly that this increase, and the carbon tax overall, is responsible for skyrocketing prices, particularly for food. So let's test that claim. Let's dig in to see what the cost of the carbon tax is on that loaf of bread that you buy at your supermarket. Now, we did kind of an exercise like this last month, where we looked at a shipment of meat from High River, Alberta, all the way through to the Walmart warehouse in Surrey, the distribution center there. And we calculated the distance traveled, the fuel consumption by the vehicle, and we noted that the average refrigerated truck can handle just under 20,000 kilograms of meat. So it becomes really simple. You find the total of carbon taxes, you divide it by the amount of goods moved, and you end up with the cost per unit. In this case, when it came to the meat, less than half a cent per kilogram. And other people have done very similar calculations, as you can see here. But we're going to have a look at something in a little bit more detail, because I think people have rightly pointed out that shipping beef from a packing plant to a warehouse is only part of the supply chain process. So let's do that deeper dive into, and this time it'll be bread, from the wheat farm to the grocery store. Let's start off at the wheat farm, okay? Planting and harvesting, the combine and the tractor will use 2 to 4 liters per kilometer, but that fuel is exempt from the carbon tax. And in fact, 90% of the fuels used on a farm are exempt from the carbon tax. However, between grain drying and heating the buildings on the farm, that is the most expensive part of the supply chain when it comes to application of the carbon tax. We'll use the grain drying specifically because that's measured in cost per acre of grain. Then there's the grain truck, takes it from the wheat from the farm to wherever it's going to go next, usually to a rail terminal, elevator somewhere. We'll say they use 45 liters per 100 kilometers, which is the same rate that we used for the meat truck last month. And the farm will pay 17.6 cents in carbon tax per liter. Now, trains are something else. 110 cars, maybe up to 5 locomotives, so we'll use 5. They'll use 8 liters per kilometer per locomotive. And we presume that they're also paying the 17.6 cents in carbon tax. Then there's the delivery truck. 45 liters per 100 kilometers. There's a couple of trucks involved there. One from the train to the mill, one from the mill to the bakery, and then maybe from the bakery to the grocery store. So here's what we have. The grain truck, carrying about 1,000 bushels, will travel, we'll say, 200 kilometers. The grain train can handle 450,000 bushels. Actually, it can handle more than that, but we ratcheted it down a little bit. And we'll say it travels about 1,500 kilometers. And then the delivery truck to and fro between rail lines, mills, bakeries, and grocery stores come to about, 200 kilometers, let's say. Okay? Now, let's do some math. The grain dryer, according to the Agricultural Producers Association of Saskatchewan, will cost the farmer $6.40 per acre of wheat. The average yield per acre is 62 bushels, so the math is fairly simple. You divide $6.40 by 62 bushels, and the carbon tax per bushel, rounding up a little bit, is 10 cents. Grain truck. 1,000 bushels, 200 kilometers, 45 liters of fuel per 100 kilometers. That comes to 90 liters total. Carbon tax, as you see, the total cost to move the grain by the truck is $15.84. Divide that by 1,000, you end up with, and we'll round it up again to 1.6 cents per bushel. The grain train. Now again, it actually can move more than 450,000 bushels, but we've ratcheted that down. 1,500 kilometers. These things use about 800 liters of fuel per 100 kilometers. And so that's 12,000 liters total per locomotive. The carbon tax of 17.6 cents per liter equals just over $2,000 per locomotive. And then if you have 5 locomotives, the total is over $10,000. But you divide that by that massive amount of grain that they're carrying, and it comes out to about 2.4 cents per bushel. Delivery truck 1 and 2 about the same. We're giving them 100 kilometers of travel, probably less than that. The amount of carbon tax, as you can see, works out to $8.06. Divide that by 1,000 comes up to, and we round it up again, 0.009 cents per bushel. And then about the same for the delivery truck. So here's the total cost. All right. Grain drying, 10 cents. Grain truck, 1.6 cents per bushel. Grain train, 2.4 cents. The delivery trucks will just say almost 2 cents per bushel to move the grain back and forth when it gets too close to its destination. But we'll total it up to about 15.8 cents per bushel being paid along the supply chain per bushel in carbon tax. All right? But 1 bushel of wheat yields 90 loaves of bread, either 454 kilograms or a pound, you take your pick. So the carbon tax of 15.8 cents per bushel divided by 90 comes out to 0.18 cents per loaf of bread. Okay, so that's less than a penny. That's only 0.2 of a cent. But there's a couple of things that we have to realize here. First, the farmers are paying the highest carbon tax per unit of output. Drying grain with natural gas or propane is expensive, even without the carbon tax. And the price they get for that unit of output rises and falls according to what the buyers are willing to pay. In fact, farmers are often price takers. That's why the federal government is working with farmers to upgrade grain drying equipment. There's been more than 100 upgrades supported by over $20 million in federal funding so far. But a second thing, we can't overlook the fact that everyone along the supply chain that's in business, from the farmers to the grocery store, can write off at least part of their carbon tax cost. We didn't calculate that in here. That said, if my calculations are open to being challenged, and I'm sure they are, here's an invitation. If you have other data, do you have another way of calculating the cost of the carbon tax per unit of that loaf of bread? Then let's have it. If you have that, I'm going to give you my email in just a second, and you're more than welcome to get through to me and straighten me out, and I'll be more than happy to come back on here and tell everybody what I've heard. But let's face it, even if I'm out by 10 times, the impact of the carbon tax on that loaf of bread is, well, maybe 2 cents a loaf. And the story being peddled out there about the carbon tax just ratcheting up the price of everything to astronomical levels is simply meant to mislead and make people mad. It's a convenient weapon for the conservative opposition.
Buckle up.
If things are going wrong and you're wondering who to blame, you best ignore the facts and just blame the carbon tax. Dog ran away, carbon tax. Wife left you today, carbon tax. Whenever things ain't going your way, there's always something you can blame. Problem with your foot, dampened bacon overcooked. Accountability, well, that means nothing to me. It's not your fault, so just relax and blame the carbon tax.